and there's nothing on Dr. Roth in the entire discovery, including no mention of any of, well, no reports of interviews after having extensive meetings with police and police and prosecutors. So we had no idea that Dr. Roth was going to come in as an expert. I had no way of doing background checks on his prior trials, his prior opinions, prior depositions, as well as those of Dr. Swanner. And I think that with all of the motions and arguments that the state has made about our experts, that we should have been entitled to those of anyone testifying in a murder trial against Dr. Husel, that were going to render opinions as it related to their opinion, their medical opinions, and their medically based opinions, which the two aforementioned statements and testimony clearly outlines. And for that reason, we would be moving for a motion for mistrial on those two issues.
Mr. Zahn?
Thank you, Your Honor. The court ruled on this that not only were the questions appropriate, they were relevant and allowed to come into evidence. So I don't know if he's asking for a mistrial based on your rulings on that, Judge, but there was nothing inappropriate about anything that was asked Dr. Swanner or Dr. Ralston regarding their background, education, and training. It informs the jury about who they are and why they are making these decisions and why they're qualified to make these decisions. Mr. Baez, at least in relation to some of the people at Trinity, stated that the people that reviewed this had no clinical experience. I believe he made that in reference to Dr. Taco Bradley, an assertion that is not true, but regardless, making the point that the administrators didn't know what they were doing, and the implication is that they were framing Dr. Husel without basis for murder, is part of their argument, and we can talk about why they're qualified to do what they're doing. We can talk about not only why they're qualified, but why they are doing it, because we're medical doctors with clinical experience, and this was alarming to us. So it's entirely appropriate to ask someone's background and why they're qualified to make a statement. We're not offering them as experts under Rule 16K, but as this court has ruled again and again and again, they are qualified to talk about what they do and what their experience is and why they did things in this case. Not rendering a outsider's opinion like the 5 experts that we gave them 2 years ago in their reports. That's a different thing altogether. These people are doctors with clinical experience, and that based upon that education, training, and experience, they are allowed to comment on what they did in this case and what their practices are. And the court has ruled, like I've lost count of how many times you've ruled, that's entirely appropriate in this case. So we have done absolutely nothing inappropriate. It is prejudicial to the defense. Everything we do is meant to be prejudicial to the defense. That's what we do. So I don't believe that is a valid objection in this matter. It's not, but just because something's prejudicial doesn't mean it's not allowed under the rules of evidence. What we do is meant to, we're trying to convict them. That's what we do. So there is no basis at all for a motion of mistrial on what Mr. Baez just said. Thank you.
Mr. Baez?
No response. I think I just made my record.
Okay. The court has been discussing these types of issues from day one, the difference between subjective and objective opinions. I've also given living instructions to the jury on similar issues, and including that issue. I feel it's fair that they can comment about why they did a certain act. Okay, it does not allude directly to the doctor, it just alludes to what they're doing. I don't think it's been prejudicial at all, so the motion's overruled.
Thank you.
Okay, we ready? Okay, Ms. Schaefer, please.
It's my phone. I keep hearing it. I don't even know where my phone is. I'm just going to
sorry?
We're talking to each other.
Talking about what I'm gonna do this weekend. Just-
Oh. That's the problem with this bell I'm in. We have a judges meeting at noon tomorrow to discuss how long this is going to be up. Emergency meeting. I convinced them to pull it off.
It's just, I have soccer dad duties this weekend, so it's,
I'm glad all mine are grown, so.
How old are your kids?
Except I do have a grandchild coming in May.
I'm sorry, Judge?
I do have a grandchild coming in May, so I guess it restarts the
That
cycle.
restarts, that's right. About 5 years. How old are you? 12. It's fun. It's fun.
by that time I'll have some comfortable lawn chairs for you, Your Honor.
You guys looking for something in the back there?
We got Dr. Rod.
Or? Okay, cool. Doc,
want
come
him
on
up there,
down.
sir?
You can come on down. A two-lawyer escort, wow. Two distinguished lawyer escort. Might as well have a seat and relax for a second. Are you okay, ma'am? Okay. You just look like you were bending over uncomfortably or something. Of course, I do have the reflection of the glass in the way, but the door is locked. Doo, doo, doo.
All rise.
You can be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Did you have a good night? Enjoy this so? We talked about some stuff before I let you go yesterday. I don't think there was any major problems or anything, so you can disregard all that now, I guess. The other thing I wanted to talk to you about, it appears because of Court Columbus, for the rest of the duration of the trial, we'll be stopping at either 4 or 4:30 on Thursdays. Okay? It seems like flights don't work any other way. Okay? I'll steal it from you, trust me, during lunch hour. Okay? But, you know, we want to try to make this work and people have their lives too as much as we can. So that'll be the rule going out. Okay? You can plan on it accordingly. Okay? Okay, with that, we were currently with the doctor. Doctor, remember you're under oath?
That's right.
Mr. Zion?
Thank you. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Counsel. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We left off talking about the pharmacy board. I believe we left off with you saying Mount Carmel Health, under your direction, voluntarily reported this incident to the pharmacy board.
That is correct.
Did, if you are aware, did Mount Carmel Health settle with the pharmacy board?
Yes, Mount Carmel ultimately settled or came to arrangement on remediation with the Ohio State Board of Pharmacy.
Thank you. Yesterday, we talked about the size of Mount Carmel Health in central Ohio. Are you aware what size it is in comparison to other, and we're talking about size-wise, other health systems in Central Ohio? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do you know what its rank is?
I believe its rank is the second largest health system. I could be incorrect, but
And that would be 9,000, approximately 9,000 employees, approximately 2,700 doctors.
2,300, I believe.
2,300. Thank you. Did Mount Carmel, under your direction, voluntarily report this incident to the nursing board?
Yes, we did.
And why did you do that?
Objection.
I'll permit it.
Because we felt to the notion of being transparent, and that when questions would arise about the professional status or the professional responsibilities of the nurses, they were the right institution to investigate that aspect.
Was anything reported voluntarily by Mount Carmel to the medical board?
Yes, it was.
And what was reported and why was it reported?
Similar reason.
Okay,
Objection.
we're getting cumulative here off the other witnesses.
I'm sorry?
We're getting cumulative off the other witnesses. Why is that necessary? The question.
Approach real quick.
You may. Minute and a half. It's all good.
There.
We're still sitting up there. I think you guys had lots of coffee this morning. The good coffee? That's the most energetic I've heard you guys in the background. I don't even want to know what you were talking about. You got a problem? Your computer shut down. Uh-oh. Okay. Take a second. Back in the old days when everything was paper, you know, it had its problems too. Technology is a wonderful thing, but occasionally it bites us. So we're in the middle of one for my poor court reporter. Is it a battery issue? Huh?
Matt is showing.
This is what you guys should show up.
It didn't die on you, did it?
I must have got the screen of that when I was
Their eyes
turning because focusing hard to be able to pulling him because of and so when he got his glasses, it helped strengthen it, but he didn't have to do that. He literally wears his glasses. He doesn't try them. What is it?
We're trying to get it to sound like
Shanika.
No, we have Shanika.
Asking about
Other side,
like improvement.
Ryan.
Okay. Mr. Zion? Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get back going here. Mr. Zion.
I believe we left off with the medical board. did you self-report voluntarily?
Across the country, and they do so in some way on behalf of CMS, but they are our accrediting body,
CMS, what's that?
the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services with the federal government.
Okay. And did you self-report voluntarily to the Joint Commission?
We did.
All right. And when did you do that, if you recall, approximately?
It would have been, I believe, in around January of 2019.
All right. Let's talk about Medicare and Medicaid. Did the hospital get in jeopardy of losing their Medicare or Medicaid funding because of your voluntary self-reporting?
So the voluntary self-reporting leads to a survey about the issues that we reported. On the basis of that survey, they found our hospitals here in Mount Carmel out of compliance with the conditions of participation, which then placed us in jeopardy of not being able to continue to participate with Medicare and Medicaid.
What particularly was out of compliance?
The particular area related to medications and medication safety.
All right. What, if anything, did you do to get back into compliance so that you would not lose your Medicare and Medicaid funding?
So we submit a plan of remediation that demonstrates that we will be able to be back in compliance very quickly with those conditions.
What happened next with that plan?
There was some back and forth with the Ohio Department of Health and CMS, or the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
Objection, Judge. Hearsay.
Okay. Let's rephrase. He's okay so far. Doctor, you can continue. Overruled.
That plan of correction was accepted by the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and that immediate jeopardy was removed.
Do you recall the timeline of when that plan was accepted and that immediate jeopardy was removed?
I believe it was early February of 2019.
Early February of 2019.
I believe that's correct.
Was that issue thereafter resolved with Medicare and Medicaid funding at that point?
It was not.
What else happened with that?
So because of that, in the usual course of process, the Ohio Department of Health, on behalf of CMS, comes back and does a more complete or comprehensive survey of all of the aspects of participation not specific to the issue that we reported.
Okay. What happened with that?
Similarly, they found issues with some other areas related to the conditions of their participation. We had to submit a plan of correction for that, which was ultimately accepted.
All right. And then were you out of jeopardy with that part of this was the state coming in, is that right?
The Ohio Department of Health works in conjunction with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
All right. And after that, was that issue resolved?
Yes.
And do you recall approximately when that would have been resolved?
Approximately March of 2019, to the best of my recollection.
Did any of those remediation plans that the federal government and or the state working in conjunction with the federal government regarding Medicare and Medicaid depend on your actions regarding Mr. Husel's criminal case?
Objection. Calls for speculation.
It's a direct question, Your Honor.
It still calls for speculation.
Okay. Rephrase.
When one of the conditions of your remediation plan to fix the issues that were identified by Medicare, Medicaid, and the state, that Mr. Husel be criminally prosecuted?
No. Sorry.
Objection.
Overruled.
Thank you. Number 2, healthcare in the Central Ohio area. Trinity is a very large corporation, correct?
Correct.
We've heard from a previous witness that the hospital itself had an in-house media department.
They have an in-house communications department.
Communication, okay. What do in-house communication departments do in general, based on your training and experience? And what, if anything, did they do in this case?
So, in general, they do communications both external and internal about things that are happening within the health system, so both to our employees, our colleagues, to our physicians, but also to the external community, events that may be happening, new services that are offered. That's what they do in general. Specific to this case, they worked on how do we make sure that we communicate the issues that we're communicating with clarity.
Are you aware of whether or not, either at the beginning or prior to you becoming aware of the situation and coming down to Columbus to lead the hospital's response and investigation, are you aware if any outside media consultants were contracted to address the issues of Mr. Husel's dosing habits in the ICU during palliative extubations?
I am.
And were all of those strategies and all of those companies that were initially hired to deal with this issue, were they all implemented and used?
They were not.
All right. Referring specifically to States Exhibit 27A, previously identified yesterday as Defense Exhibit MCD-6. May I approach the witness, Sharon?
You may.
Have you seen this document before, sir?
I have.
And where have you seen that document before?
I've seen it a few times. I saw it around the time in December of 2018 after that, and then it was produced to me through this process, I believe through your office.
For your review and preparation for your testimony today?
That's correct.
Does it appear to be a fair and accurate copy of the document you initially became aware of?
It does.
Is it fair to say that this document came from the playbook, as it's been called, or the strategies of Project Lighthouse?
It came from an early part of that process, yes.
All right. May I publish, Your Honor? I'll use the overhead.
Any objection?
No objection.
Okay. We're going to take our luck today, huh?
Why won't this come on?
Hit the power button. Ms. Sawyer, he's looking for help.
Well, it's okay. It's blinking.
There you go.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Publishing what's been marked as 27A, States Exhibit 27A, Defense Exhibit MCD-6, titled High-Level Questions for Decision. Doctor, when you reviewed this, what is the first high-level question for decision that, is this, who made this document, if you know?
To the best of my knowledge, it was made by a communications consultant in conjunction with some members of the communication team at Mount Carmel.
Okay. And when you say, so this was an outside company contracted to respond to this situation?
Yes.
All right. And as we've talked about, what's their first question in this?
So the first question in the document is, who is the villain in our victim-villain vindicator crisis communications narrative?
And does it give choices?
It does.
Does it give discussion topics?
It does.
Does it have a subsection C referring to Ed's decision?
It does.
Who is, if you know, who is Ed in this document? Who are they referring to?
Ed is Ed Lamb, who was the Chief Executive Officer for Mount Carmel Health System.
All right. And then it's got a part 2. We're talking about, do we want to talk about dying well, correct, and choices and discussion topics, correct?
Correct.
There is a page 2 to this document, continuing on with this strategy, correct?
Correct.
There is a page 3 to this document, talking about other issues and choices and decisions for Ed Lamb to make. Is that correct?
That's correct.
A page 4 to this document with discussions, choices, and decisions for Ed Lamb to make, correct?
That is correct.
And finally, a page 5 to this document with discussions, Ed decisions, and decisions for Ed Lamb to make, correct?
Correct.
All right. Does this document in any way have Mount Carmel or Trinity Healthcare letterhead on it in any of these 5 pages?
Not that I can identify.
All right. And just so everyone's clear, not that this wasn't in Mount Carmel records, but this is not in any way indicated that it is a Mount Carmel document.
Not the document that you're showing, no.
You see this. What, if anything, do you do regarding this plan and or this media consultant that came up with the plan?
So as we learned more through the investigation process, the conclusion was that that was not the right direction for our communications approach as the facts of this situation became public. And so we chose to go with to change communication consultant and use a different one and have a different approach.
All right. When you say you changed the communication consultant, you didn't use this company, you went with a different communication consultant.
Correct.
Hired another outside firm to actually deal with your response.
That's correct.
All right. Was that plan ever implemented?
It was not.
So what was, as far as the media consultant and the plan going forward after that plan was discarded, they were fired, or not used, I don't know if fired is the right word there. What was, in your mind, the plan going forward in communications to the public and to the reporting agencies and to everyone?
So the plan was to be transparent with the public about the things that we had learned, the actions that we had taken, and the reporting that we had done up until that point, and on an ongoing basis. That we had to acknowledge that there are things that we needed to change, and that we were taking quick and decisive action.
And did that include the reporting agencies you've talked about? Going to them voluntarily?
Did our communications plan include that?
The plan going forward with communicating to people, to the public, to everyone.
Yes.
Did that include communicating, once it was okay with the prosecutor's office, to the families directly?
Yes.
And did that include speaking to the public about this through media?
Yes, and our colleagues.
Meaning the other 2,700 doctors and 9,000 employees.
2,300, but yes, that's right.
2,300, I will get that right, my apologies. 300. I don't know why I have 27. All right. Do you know how many documents were in the Lighthouse project, approximately?
Can you clarify what you mean by documents?
Well, how many pages if you were to print them out in order?
Through the entire investigation?
Yeah.
Thousands, if not tens of thousands.
All right. You've told the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about your education, your experience as a clinician. What, if anything, did you do in regards to identifying potential victims in this case? Dr. Husel, regarding his dosing habits during palliative extubations in the nighttime at the ICU.
Objection.
Sustained compound. Move, re-ask.
Did you do anything regarding identifying the patients that could have been victims in this case of Dr. Husel?
We didn't.
What did you do?
We ran a series of reports to try to identify patients who would have been impacted or were potentially impacted by these doses or similar doses.
Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury how these reports were run, what parameters there were, and what their findings were?
So these reports look at a time frame.
Judge.
He's right, sustained. Let's rephrase it.
Are you aware of the parameters of these reports?
I am.
Can you tell us what the parameters were?
He can tell us his understanding of what the parameters were? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So my understanding of the parameters of the reports in total were to look at a variety of things, including the medications used, the doses used, patients' outcomes, where the doses were used, those types of factors were in those reports.
Why would it be significant to know where those doses were used? From your understanding?
Yeah, from my understanding, sometimes doses like these are used.
Objection.
Okay. Let's go ahead and rephrase the question to him. He's getting a little beyond you.
Are these doses used 500, for instance?
Objection. We
Okay,
have
so let's do sidebar. Okay, guys, come on. You were so energetic last time. We have to bring more coffee?
I did. Great. I need to wake up my brain.
Yeah.
still working? Good morning. Hold on. Mr. Zion.
Thank you. I believe we left off with for lack of, so everyone's clear, Project Lighthouse reports that were run by Leslie Bull. You were discussing parameters. What is your understanding of the parameters?
In general or for each of the reports?
In general, and then for each report, if you can opine, if you have an understanding of what that is. Not opine, but just your understanding.
In general, those reports were meant to broaden gradually the scope to make sure that we were identifying any patients who had received doses that were potentially excessive. I do not recall the specifics of each of those reports.
Do you know in general what those parameters were?
In general, those parameters looked at the varying thresholds or doses of the different medications, the locations where the medications were administered, the time frame between the medication and patients dying. Those were generally the parameters.
When you say location, why is location? So your understanding, we just did this.
I understand.
I withdrew that.
Why is location important? What do you mean by location? And if you understand, from your understanding, why would that be important?
So the location in question was the intensive care unit or on our medical surgical units. It was not the operating area or procedural areas.
So that was excluded from these run reports.
Yes.
And what is your understanding of why that was excluded from these run reports?
Because
Sorry, from what reports?
Run reports, lighthouse reports, whatever you want to call them.
because while patients are under anesthesia and on a ventilator, doses may be needed in this type of range commonly.
Okay. So that is excluded for that reason, is your understanding?
To my knowledge and understanding, yes.
All right. Do you know how many of these run reports were made?
Cumulatively, I do not recall, not collectively.
Do you know why different run reports were made? Were any of the variables changed regarding doses, time in between administration, dose of death, et cetera? Were any of those changed in any of these run reports?
And you're talking about the first 5 reports?
Five.
Yep.
So there was 5 run reports from Leslie Bolton.
From Leslie Bolton, that's
Okay, you
correct.
have one question on right now. You just added another question while he was in the middle of the answer. So let's go back and do it in an order that's organized, please.
How many reports did Leslie Bolton run?
To the best of my recollection, there were 5.
And why were there 5, to the best of your understanding?
Because those reports gradually broadened the criteria to make sure that no patients were missed.
Did you see all of these reports initially?
I did not.
Which one, did you see some of these reports initially?
Initially, like as they were run, no, that was prior. Some of those reports were prior to my direct involvement.
All right. At some point, did you see these reports?
Eventually, I saw these reports.
All right. Did any of these reports, when you initially saw them, contain a person we've designated as TY? Do you know who I'm talking about when I say TY?
I do.
All right. Tell us about whether you were aware of patient TY initially,
I was not.
and why not?
Because I learned about patient TI before I went into that particular report. That was a report that was done prior to my direct involvement.
All right. What, if anything, did you do with those reports run by Leslie Bowman yourself?
We used those reports to review the medical records of the patients who were identify patients where we felt the doses were excessive and we needed to communicate that with family members.
And how many patients were identified in these reports?
Ultimately, 35.
And so 35 families were contacted eventually, ultimately?
Ultimately.
At some point during your involvement in this investigation, were any employees of Mount Carmel placed on leave? Besides, we've heard about Mr. Husel's leave. Besides Mr. Husel,
Yes, other employees were placed on leave.
do you know how many pharmacists were placed on leave?
I do not know the exact number at this point.
Do you know if any nurses were placed on leave?
Yes, they were.
Do you know if any other doctors or administrators who were also doctors were placed on leave?
Yes, they were.
And do you know approximately when they would have been placed on leave?
To the best of my recollection, the majority were in January of 2019, but as new cases were discovered, sometimes other colleagues, nurses, pharmacists were placed on leave as those cases came to our attention.
At some point in 2019, was a decision made on these nurses, doctors, and pharmacists, besides Mr. Husel, regarding their continued employment at Mount Carmel?
Yes,
Do you know if any pharmacists were terminated from employment at Mount Carmel because of their involvement in Dr. Husel's dosing habits and palliative withdrawals?
yes, some were.
Do you recall the number that were?
I do not.
Do you know if any nurses were terminated as a result of their involvement in the dosing habits of Dr. Husel during palliative withdrawals?
Objection.
I'll permit it.
Compound argumentative questions.
I understand the objection overruled.
Yes,
Do you know the number?
I do not recall the number.
Do you know if any doctors and/or administrators that were doctors, were ultimately terminated because of their supervisory role of Dr. Husel while he was administering these doses during palliative extubation?
Yes,
And do you know the number of that?
I do not remember off the top of my head, no.
So we have the run sheets from Leslie Bowman. What, if anything, do you do with those run sheets? What, if anything, do you do with those run sheets?
Are you referring to Project Lighthouse, or are you
We'll
referring?
call it Project Lighthouse. The run sheets, so we're being
Okay.
specific, the run sheets, Project Lighthouse, that were compiled by Leslie Bowman, the things we talked about yesterday and today.
We review the medical records of those patients that were identified, and in some cases, I interview the clinicians and caregivers who were involved.
All right? And is this part of a criminal investigation, or is this part of the hospital's investigation?
This is the hospital's investigation.
All right. Based on your investigation, based on your looking at these run sheets, digging into these run sheets of Leslie Bowman, did you create any document or any compilation based upon that?
Me personally?
You personally or your team at your direction that you would be familiar with?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to show you what I marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 27. Do you recognize State's Exhibit 27, sir?
I do.
And for the record, it is a 2-page document.
It is.
Does it appear to be a fair and accurate copy of that document?
It does.
Can you explain what State's Exhibit 27 is?
Yes, that was a document that, so at that point in time, we had publicly said that we identified 27 patients. This would have been on around January of 2019, that we identified 27 patients. The Franklin County Prosecutor's Office asked me to produce that report, which spoke to the facts of dosing and patients and timing and other factors, but the facts from the medical records on those 27 patients.
All right. So that we're clear, this was prepared for your internal hospital review, but requested after the fact by the county prosecutor.
No, that was prepared at the request of the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office specifically.
All right. So this was the compilation you prepared for Ron O'Brien.
Correct.
All right. May I publish, Your Honor?
Objection, that's
We're going to have to go sidebar here. I can imagine what needs to be discussed. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm trying to figure out what that pounding noise is. That's why I sent the bailiff off. So you're going to have to help me out a little bit and talk amongst each other while we work. Okay? I don't know about you all, but that thudding above my head was not making me happy.
Again, the only thing I would add to my
Did we find out who the culprit was? There's a what? A field trip? Is it one of Judge Brown's? Okay, then it's okay. I'm kidding, okay? Sometimes they don't realize that we're working down here, so. You may, next question.
Thank you. So you aren't calling the prosecutor, telling him what to do. The prosecutor called you and told you what to do.
Objection, is this cross-examination?
I'll permit the question.
Can you restate the question, please?
He wants to know, you did your work according to the direction of the prosecutor in producing that item?
That is correct.
All right. And that document was based on the hospital's internal investigation.
That was based on the medical records.
All right. And you also indicated that you or your team actually interviewed clinicians that were involved in those cases?
As part of the hospital investigation, yes. Yes.
That's what I mean.
Yes.
And they publicly announced 27?
Yes, to the best of my recollection, that's correct.
And then at the direction of Mr. O'Brien, you put it in a report and brought it to him?
Yes,
And did you personally bring it to him?
I did.
And did you sit down with Mr. O'Brien and the...
Was that an I did?
He
Yes.
said, I did, yes. Remember, you're in the fishbowl there, okay?
And did you then thereafter sit down and discuss these cases with the detectives and Mr. O'Brien prior to this case being charged?
That report I discussed with Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Lowe. I did not discuss that report, to my recollection, with the detectives.
Do you recall if other people were there?
I believe in that meeting, it would have been just Mr. O'Brien and Mr. Lowe, although another member of the prosecutor's office may have been there.
At some point, did you discuss that with the police?
Discuss that report?
report or those findings?
No, not to my recollection.
Do you recall when that meeting would have been, approximately?
That meeting would have been, to my best of my knowledge, around January of 2020, or 2019, I'm sorry.
2019. Doctor, based on your understanding of the hospital's investigation, were there any other physicians, and there's approximately 2,300 in this system, correct?
Correct.
Got that right there. Of the 2,300 other doctors in this system, outside of the OR, patients off the ventilator, were there any other doctors in the entire system giving doses of 500 micrograms or above of fentanyl?
Objection.
I'll permit it.
Yeah. Outside of OR procedural areas or not on the ventilator, no, there's only one physician.
And who was that one physician?
That was Dr. Husel.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Cross, Mr. Baez?
Do you want any of this stuff up here?
Yeah, you got to go up there.
All of it? Well, these are my notes, so I'll take those. I left this. This is one.
You guys holding up okay?
Yep.
Okay. Didn't know if you wore your guys out with the conversation, so.
One moment, Your Honor.
Judge, I think we may need to address something sidebar before I...
Okay? Well, we'll take our break here. Let's take a couple minutes so you guys can go do whatever you jurors do. Okay?
All right.
Let's come back at 10:30 and we'll continue on.
No, I don't. I'm good. I got it.
You want to go sidebar over here,
Yes.
guys? Have a great break, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, can I just real quick?
reaction to what you saw. Okay? My question to you goes, did you ever review any of the trial preparation peer reviews and give rendering an opinion today?
Did I ever review trial preparation peer? Can you?
Peer reviews,
Never.
reviews by doctors about any of the facts in this case.
Did I ever once read something that was that was created under peer review? Is that your question?
No, my question is, there were a series of peer reviews done, and there were reports generated relative to some of the performances by the doctor on various types of cases.
I'm just want to make sure I answer your question clearly. So you mean external groups that reviewed some of these records?
Yes.
Did I read their reports?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Tom, who represents the hospital here today?
I do, Your Honor. Louis Gao on behalf of Mount Carmel.
Mr. Gall, I have a problem now. What's the hospital's position?
So I don't believe, Dr. Roth, and we can ask him, I don't believe he reviewed those reports in anticipation of testifying today, but during the course of his regular job duties in responding to this incident, he did review those reports. So it was not necessarily connected with his testimony. I think he could clarify that, and we maintain privilege over those materials. And Your Honor has ruled, as I know you may have said at sidebar, you ruled approximately a year ago after the in-camera review in which we provided those. We did agree during the privilege litigation earlier in this matter to a stipulation with the parties, and per that stipulation, we agreed to produce the Greeley external peer review for 1 through 35 patients. Those have been produced to both sides. And then we also produced some additional notes that we stipulated that we would produce on the condition that neither party would seek any of the additional material on our privilege. And so that would include the additional Greeley reports as well as other material that was contained on our privilege.
Okay, well, here's the dilemma I have. We're testifying here, and there's been these mystery reports all of a sudden, and he's rendering testimony based upon them. I think I have a problem all of a sudden because of the situation. You can maintain your privileges. I'm going to take 2 minutes, think about it. I understand your position, but I want to think about it. Okay?
Okay.
Is there any questions on this issue of the witness?
Can I have a moment, Judge?
Can I just ask you a question? Are we off the record at this point?
We can be off the record.
What the specific document was on the form that this information came from, review that specific document, because we don't think it's the whole case law. So if we review the document, the specific number, maybe that would resolve this whole issue.
Judge, I have questions for the witness.
Chill. Thanks, guys. Have a great day. Okay, we're back on the record. Mr. Bias.
Dr. Roth, you would agree that the Greeley reports are peer review reports that have to deal specifically with just Dr. William Husel, correct?
Correct.
Your Honor, now we're getting into the content of the Greeley reports, which we've maintained the privilege on. If we need to do this in camera, I think we could probably do that, but again, once we get into the substance of what's been withheld as privilege, we risk potential waiver issues.
I understand that. I would sustain your objection. His question was reliance. That was the whole purpose of the inquiry. Is there anything else?
Yes. The report that you testified to today about that involved 2,300 employees Was that was separate and distinct from the Greeley report, correct?
Can I clarify your question? May I clarify your question?
Yes.
This question you can't
Yes.
answer because it's not clear?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Rephrase.
The report that you referenced in your testimony, was it discussed with the prosecution prior to your testimony today?
Stop. Greeley report. Is that Lighthouse?
No, Your Honor, if I may clarify,
Okay.
the Greeley reports were included on our privilege log. Greeley is an external peer review consultant who will look at medical files and make a determination
Okay.
on a peer review basis. It was all done at the direction of Mount Carmel or Trinity attorneys.
I looked at that a year ago. I didn't remember the official name of it.
Sure.
Okay?
Yes. The report that you're discussing is not part of that report, correct?
The report that said
That,
only one provider, one physician had ordered.
correct.
So can you restate your question, please?
Yes.
Wants to know if that one person thing we've been talking about
Yeah.
all morning, was the Greeley any part of that?
It was part of that.
Hold on. Anything else?
This report, was it, I'm trying to ask the question without getting into privileged information.
Well, we will stop you if you do.
Could I help and clarify the record?
Sure, maybe you
Potentially?
can, yeah.
I just want to make sure it's clear. The report, though, that was not introduced into evidence, but that was discussed during your testimony, that was not a report that appeared on the privilege log. It's separate and distinct from Greeley, correct?
Correct.
And was that what you were getting at?
Yes.
And is it true that the report that you, again, was not admitted into that evidence, but that was discussed during your testimony, that was a report generated in response to a subpoena that was issued by the defense asking for any doctors system-wide who had administered or ordered 500 micrograms or greater? Is that correct?
That is also correct.
And just for the record, Your Honor, and this is a proffer from counsel, once that subpoena was issued for 500 micrograms or greater system-wide, we realized that could include people in the operating room or ventilators, and it would probably be over-inclusive for the purposes of this trial. So we negotiated with the defense to limit the subpoena only to doctors who had ordered it outside the operating room or off a ventilator. And as part of that process, Dr. Roth, utilizing some of the data runs, utilizing some of the material that does appear on the privilege log, conducted that review, and we created the chart that, again, was not admitted into evidence, but that was discussed during direct testimony.
The Greeley information he used
So this
was
chart
the
includes
things that were
privileged
surrendered
information.
in the agreement.
So
Or he is beyond that.
I would probably ask Dr. Roth to clarify what was used rather than me
Okay,
testifying.
well, doctor, what did you use out of the Greeley report? That's the proper name for it.
Well, and there are more than one. So I guess I'm also wanting to clarify the Greeley report, for which is still under privilege. Is that a fair question to clarify?
Yeah.
Okay. So we did review that as part of the review of the medical records for some of the patients that were identified in the data run.
Okay, there was an excess of 500 reports,
500.
500 individual peer reviews.
Patients, I believe patients, Your Honor. I think the
No.
issue was, I'm sorry, I think the issue was with the request, you have a number of physicians and a number of hospitals. So you have to whittle that down to see which medical records you would look through, see which patients were indeed on or not on a ventilator. And so as that process, you need to use some data so you're not looking at every single patient who's been treated at every single hospital and having to go into the medical records. So that was the process of winnowing it down to patients who could have received these doses outside of our operating room or on a ventilator, but then it actually required going into the medical records and determining if they were on a ventilator, because that is not something that can be generated via a data run. There's not a parameter that can be checked.
It basically comes down, he's been talking about his understanding why things were working. Okay, and we kept talking about the Lighthouse report. Evidently, he reviewed part of the Greeley report. Okay, and I was trying to figure out the extent. If it was the 35 you surrender and that was the only part he did, then privilege log stays. If he went beyond that, then we're going to have to make a quick plan because I'm basically going to lose the afternoon. And we'll have to figure out logistically what we're doing. So, do you understand what we're talking about, Doctor?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Did you go beyond the 35 reports?
For the purpose of generating the report in response to the defense, we used a broader report that had 400 patients. We didn't use all 400, but some of the patients we used from that report.
Some of the patients you use, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last word.
Some of the patients that were in the report. Okay. I'm going to bring the jury in. I'm going to fall. Yeah, go ahead.
Just for the record, so that I have it in my mind and that it's clear on the record. This was all at the request of the defense that this was done. But by agreement and stipulation, you did this and said, we will look at this privileged material at your request and give you a compilation of our results without waiving privilege. Is that what happened here? At the request of the defense?
I don't think this witness can answer what.
Okay, well, I've got his lawyer here. Do you want to tackle that?
I'm happy to. So we received the subpoena, and we narrowed the scope of the subpoena so that we could be responsive to it. And then we undertook our exercise to get the response.
Stop. He's not under oath. He's a lawyer and officer of the court, so he knows the ramifications of all the nice things I can do to him if he gets caught. Tell me a whopper.
Of course. So we narrowed the scope, and then based on that, we went about our work to be able to provide a responsive report. It was not a report that was already in our records. We had to use the existing material we had to generate that report. And we had to undertake efforts to look in the medical records to determine if the patients were or were not on a ventilator. And that process allowed us to create the report that we produced to the defense, and then we also produced it to the prosecution.
Is that this report?
That is not this report.
There it is.
It is a separate report.
Is this report based on that separate report?
No, this report was generated well before the report that we've been discussing. That was the 500 micrograms of greater, only Dr. Husel report, just for short.
So if we gave you a report, why don't we have it?
You have everything.
We have everything we can do. And our report was about Dr. Husel.
Excuse me. Not according to what he said.
Okay, time out, folks. I'll let you guys talk about that elsewhere here. Any other questions of the doctor?
No, nothing, Steve.
Not from defense.
Okay, you can step off.
Yes, sir.
Don't take them away, but take them out.
Got it.
Okay?
That indicates when they responded and whether or not it's
It was up there.
No, it's not up there. This
I
is
said
up
it
there.
was.
I know, but that's the one I thought.
All right.
Anything else for me, Your Honor?
Don't go very far. Stay right there for now. We're going to go on the record. Okay. I'm going to bring the jury in. I'm going to fall on the sword and say I have to do my judge thing. And I'm going to give them an early thing. everybody has till noon tomorrow to give me their position in writing. Okay, if you want it under seal, we can arrange that, since I imagine you're going to want to yell under seal. Okay? And then I'll make a decision. I will try to have that done by 2 o'clock. It's a Simo thing, you won't be able to respond back to the other side, so make your best shot. Okay? If we disseminate it, we have it all electronic, and we can do that. Okay?
Yes, Your Honor. Just for clarification, and I'd ask the defense to respond, so I have it in my mind. Big picture here, what they're saying is, they're objecting to the testimony that identifies Dr. Husel, who is the only physician in the Mount Carmel system, outside of the OR, off a ventilator, administering a dose of 500 mics and above. That is the issue here, correct? Is that the issue? Because I just want to make sure we're writing about the same stuff.
No.
And then not having the data that backs that up.
No.
Okay?
Judge, I think we need to know, I think the court needs to review exactly what it determined was privileged before we can take to the next step. We have no idea what this court determined to be privileged and whether in fact... I'm sorry?
That's why it's privileged.
Right, so what we were asking is that the court review, in fact, it reviewed and made the determination to be privileged, and to see if this report is included in what was reviewed by the court and determined to be privileged. Because if it's privileged, the prosecutor shouldn't be asking questions about it.
Okay.
Especially since, and that's what I think we were asking the court to do.
Here, this is how I see it, okay? Before anybody else talks. I was required to make a decision, I'll turn on my mic. I was required to make a decision about a privilege law, okay? There is this thing in there, but it's also directive of the underlying reports, okay? So the peer reviews. So it had the appearance of trial prep and work product within that aspect of it. All of them are at a completely different standard of this case. So there is that damage possibility there that someone tried to use it when it's on a completely different standard, and that's a battle we'll have to fight in the future if I release them. I haven't heard anything yet that makes me want to release it. I do have concerns about the extent he did it there. I may just release the report, not the peer reviews. That's why I'm giving you guys until noon tomorrow to tell me what I should and shouldn't do.
Your Honor, if I may, to the extent, and I'm not sure if this was what Mr. Bias was requesting, but this report that was introduced to Dr. Roth, I put together the privilege log, which all the parties have the privilege log, as well as the in-camera package that was over 2,500 documents, pages that the court reviewed. This was not in that privilege material. So I just want to make that representation of the parties. So this report and the report that wasn't introduced that Dr. Roth testified about was not within the privilege material.
Okay.
That's just, hold on. Can we pull up the report that has the title on it?
Can I ask one question on the record just to make sure I'm
Yes.
Your Honor, may I have the floor for a minute just to confirm?
Yeah.
Okay, so from my understanding, what we're writing about, this is for you, Louis, is defense requested how many doctors hospital-wide were doing this, and that is when this issue of you guys would run this report and review confidential material that we stipulated everything wouldn't be waived. So this was all done at defense's request to determine how many doctors hospital-wide were doing this.
Okay, that's not quite the way.
I was just trying to
Defense
confirm.
issued a subpoena. They filed a privilege log in response to it. which means I have to do an in-camera review. Okay? I went through, and I basically gave up 5 days of my life going through this. Okay? I mean, I was doing it about 12 to 16 hours a day to get through all the documents. And you guys are well aware how many documents already exist. Okay? I made a decision as to what was privileged and what wasn't. And there wasn't a lot that went out because of the nature of what it was. Okay? My concern here today is the doctor said he relied upon this magic report partway. Okay? I'm trying to understand two things. One, this report was generated far after the incidences where he created the lighthouse. Okay? At least my belief is that. It may not be completely accurate. Okay? The second issue becomes, even if he relied upon this report, to what extent do I have to review? Okay? Because there's some narratives that go on analyzing what's out there, and then there's the peer reviews. So I may give the analysis, but not the peer reviews. I'm not quite sure yet. Because, quite frankly, the peer reviews, they're done on a completely different standard for a completely different purpose. And I really don't see where, my gut is, I don't see where they're at issue here.
So what is the exact objection that we are addressing in our written responses?
Well, what it is it's a request for additional information. That's how it all started. Whether because of the testimony of the last doctor indicating he relied upon things, that brought up the issue of mystery reports. I directed everybody to go out and talk to counsel for the hospital and see if we had those, if there was anything else, and that brought us to this. I think that fairly represents what's happened.
Kind of.
Okay. I love when people tell me kind of.
Here's the thing I think the board needs to consider as well. Dr. Swanner yesterday testified to some report that was obviously not the 5 reports that are utilized to impeach him because it was brought up during redirect that this was some other report. Dr. Swanner was fired from, or put on leave in January. He was not involved and even fired in July. Any requests from the defense to generate this report he would not have had access to that. So how in the world is Dr. Swanner getting to access to reports that may or may not be privileged? That's for, at some point, we're all going to determine. But he's certainly testifying to this report that was either allegedly or possibly made as a result of a defense request. So for that reason, I think what we have to do is we're going to have to go through all of what was turned over, the voluminous number of documents that we're looking at, to see where that lies in comparison to with what the testimony has been to date.
Okay, let's stop for a second. You had your right to interlocutory appeal. Okay, I made the decision based upon what I had. Okay, it is a standing order right now. Okay, if you all want to try to convince me why I should come off of it, fine. But what the doctor said yesterday, he relied on something, that doesn't help me in this situation. Okay? It's my understanding all these documents were prepared after he was gone.
Right, which is why we need to figure out how he's testifying to a report.
But you don't know that's the report he's testifying to. No one got out of him anything along the lines of what we talked about today. Yes?
I was just going to say that, Judge, that he said he was aware of it. They had the record available to see exactly what he said. He was aware of that. And then they did have an opportunity to cross him on how he was aware of that, pointing out that the Bowman-run lighthouse reports were particular to Husel. So they had their opportunity to test his knowledge of that statement. They did cross him on that. That's like you said, I was just agreeing, I was just going to reiterate what the court said. You made a ruling on that. This is about Dr. Roth, I believe, for tomorrow, limited to Dr. Roth.
Well, Dr. Roth is Monday now. We're not working tomorrow, guys. No one was planning on it, were you?
I think we just got confused because you said our responses were due tomorrow.
Your responses
Yeah,
are
but
due
we're
tomorrow.
not.
You're working,
Yes,
but
we're-
we're not working. Well, we're working, but
Judge, can I request a little bit longer than noon tomorrow? I think, given the number of documents that this involves.
okay.
It's quite a bit.
For the argument, why would you need longer? Because you don't know what the documents are. They're privileged. We're dealing with the concepts.
Okay, then,
Okay, I have to be back on Monday. Okay? I thought tomorrow was fair. I can go 5 today if you wish. I mean, if you're gonna say, if we get past, I might go 2 o'clock, but past that, it's unfair to me. Okay?
totally understand, Judge. If I could just inquire, or ask the court to inquire, of the court reporter, how quickly we could get a transcript. I think we need to get transcripts of the testimony from both of the witnesses that is relevant to this alleged report. So,
Do you need a minute to figure that out?
I can't write and talk at the same time, so this actually is a rough draft of this transcript. So
assuming all parties agree a rough draft is fine?
Rough drafts.
Yes, and you can text or call or whatever about spelling, and errors are okay in spelling.
And we are looking at all the testimony of Dr. Swanner and Dr. Rock.
No, I think we could give search terms that could help with not having to do full transcripts.
Anticipation of that concept, what as soon as I hear completeness?
Yeah, I'm worried about that.
And I'm not trying to make her a buck, I'm just saying, hey, you know, aren't you just better off just to order the entire thing? Because it was in and out several times in the testimony. Oh, she's got her paper.
No, I was trying to see.
No, I wasn't talking about you.
I was just making a cost,
That's fine.
you know.
I'm just trying to, you do it the way you want.
No,
You're
I'm not
going using it.
I think we've resolved.
Okay, I don't know what you're trying to do.
Your Honor, would it be possible to have a sidebar to talk about Swanner's testimony yesterday regarding his report? I think I may be able
Sure.
for some clarity. Thank you.
But it was not, that's the report, I'm sorry, for the record.
This document indicates that there were TG of 0001176 is an average. That's the basis. And so that was just my clarification based on this water versus the subsequent run report that I believe was the basis of that process.
Are you talking while I was on the record? Or are you just talking to each other?
I just want to ask the.
You're on the record. You're on the record.
Sorry.
So just to clarify, this report here pursuant to defense subpoena, be the one that reviewed Tracy Young into this case?
No, because as I think you're all aware, Tracy they were not going to but she appeared. So this did not reveal her. Dr. Schwanner never reviewed the chart that I just brought back on the base. He never reviewed that in preparation for his testimony. He line that he calls prior to his suspension so I'm just trying to make sure everyone knows the facts so that to the extent anyone is going to be asserting their
That response to the subpoena, to their subpoena, did not reveal allegations that were from the board's
Tracy Young this has come out in testimony. Came to prominence in Mount Carmel from a request. This and also appeared on other reports. I don't think that anyone recognized potential harm in this case to Mount Carmel's in the best practices. Yeah, so that's the state of affairs. Incorrect. The hospital they wanted to understand the impact in the wake of what they had discovered about it. They wanted to understand what that conditions could have impacted. That's when they started looking at the convention. Whether it was running this out or that. But there was also councils.
we get to Dr. Husel was the only one system-wide in Mount Carmel getting these doses, 500 in a bar, all together, outside the area, is because of a defense subpoena requesting information about who else is doing this. And you guys had to look at privilege stuff to do that, but then you produced that report in response to their subpoena, and that's what it revealed, that there were no other doctors doing this, only Dr. Husel.
I think that's true with respect to responding to the subpoena, but I think the hospital had confidence that that was the case as they were doing their investigation. Understand, we have other doctors engaging in the same practice that we have here. So I don't believe the hospital or only came to the realization that it was only Husel responsible for that. Because they had their own applications for patients, they didn't know what they were doing. There were no other doctors using the doses. So there was not a report generated. I think they gave confidence through that process that there were not other doctors engaging in some way.
Here's the key to introduce that information in this case.
I'm not. That's where you go.
So, but no, but I mean, that report that says that was at the request of the defense and provided to both parties months ago.
Yeah, I said that. Yes. Okay.
Right.
Very clear, based off of the factual representations made today by Dr. Carmel's attorney, as well as what was disclosed in discovery and what we can, that Dr. Schwann was not a part of the world of these studies. The highest risk of discovery involving any other physician in these doses. So the next impression questions, why Mr. Zion is doing the show in front of the jury asking about these studies that apparently either didn't know about or did know about before he asked on the record and the direct evidence of which studies involving other physicians. And then second, laying the foundation for Dr. response about the same line of questioning about studies done on other IC physicians prior
here, ask for it. Let me sit down. I hate the plexiglass. Okay. As my duties of a judge, sometimes I have to deal with issues. Something's come up I need to deal with. Okay? It's my doing. Okay? It's something I have to do. Now, when I was a young lawyer, I watched a judge ice a jury for the entire afternoon. And it just wasn't right in my eyes. I'm good, but I can't pull out a miracle in 5 minutes. So I need some time to do something. So I'm going to send you home early today. You're not to take any inference to anybody while you're going home. Okay? Ms. Schaefer and I've got a lot to do today. Okay? Okay? You're not to draw any inferences from it either. So I'm going to give you the rest of the day off. Okay? Unless you guys want, of course, you guys might want to sit back there all afternoon and have a good time. Okay? I don't expect it changes your pay. Okay? That some we give you. Please understand, if I could do it any other way, I would, but I don't have a choice. Okay? So I've got to get some stuff done. Okay? Not like I've been ignoring things, but there are always things that come up in trials. Okay? You're not to take any inference from it. Okay? Let's get started Monday at 9. Remember, I'm giving you Fridays off. I figured you could use the rest. Okay? Have a wonderful weekend. Remember the admonitions. Don't discuss the case. Don't do any of your own investigation and ignore the media. Okay? They were live while some of it was going on. I don't want you to have any idea of what's going on. Okay? We understand each other? You want to see an upset judge? I'm a pretty nice guy. You want to see an upset judge? I'm the wrong guy to get upset. Okay? So let's follow the rules. We'll get started Monday at 9. Okay? Bailiff, call them up.
All right.
You guys have a great weekend. At least I hope you all do. And I apologize for doing this to you guys, but I have no choice.
Yeah, no sidebars, just testimony.
So